What's up everyone and welcome back to another Transplants video. I am talking to you on the Thursday night where I'm just editing this. We've just reached 400 subscribers. That's massive thanks to some of you guys from the transplant community who've been helping out. Can we keep that going please? The more subscribers we get, the closer we get to 1,000 subscribers, the more we'll be able to donate to the transplant community when we can. Just please keep going with it. It's brilliant. I'm really enjoying doing these myself. It's really self-motivating in that respect. So please keep it all going. Click that subscribe button and let's get into it.
And today we are joined by Murray Beehan. Have I butchered your name there, Murray?
Yeah, that's close enough for me. Yeah.
How are you, mate? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm fresh and ready to roll.
Absolutely. So Murray's one of the more interesting stories that we've had so far, I think, because there isn't much pre-transplant for you. You always start with pre-transplant, but for yourself, it started very, very early on, didn't it?
Yeah. So I was born with renal failure. The quickest way I can describe it is a mistake at birth caused my kidneys to fail. So I was given about 14 days to live from birth, and I surpassed that. I was then tried on peritoneal dialysis to see if it would work, and it did work. So that sustained me for about a week. The hospital then didn't want to do it any longer because they thought it wouldn't work any longer. And the aim was really to try and make it to 2 years old, because that was when they were doing experimental transplants in children in Guy's Hospital. Fortunately, I made it to 2 years old and I had the transplant, but unfortunately that failed within, I'd say about 10 days. It was an infection that caused the transplant to fail. I then went back on hemodialysis because I couldn't have peritoneal dialysis any longer, and built me up for a second transplant, and that was at 3 years old, and that lasted around about a month until it clotted off. And then I went on to hemodialysis for another 2 years, where I had another transplant at 5 years old, and that lasted 26 years, and I've been on dialysis for the last just over 2 years now.
Talk to me about you were very, very early in being introduced to transplant sport and the games.
Yeah.
So how did it come about for you, really?
Well, I had my third transplant at Birmingham Children's Hospital, and the nurses and doctors there essentially said to us that it would be a good idea for us to attend because it's good for rehabilitation and you might meet people in the same situation as you or being through similar circumstances. So the first game I went to, I think, was Exeter. Was it Exeter? Something, maybe 92, I think I went. And I think the only event I did was, the 25-meter dash or something like that. I didn't really know which way to run, but it sort of began a annual trip that me and my family continue to do to this day. It has not only provided rehabilitation at the start physically, but it also assisted in that my parents met other parents with children that were similar to me. And my brothers also met people that were similar to me as well, because we live in a rural area. We would never have met anyone like myself otherwise. And in the sporting community, you meet like-minded individuals as well, which tends to be people who want to help themselves, who want to try and better themselves through their own abilities.
Absolutely. So do you think we haven't really seen much of like the families? We haven't talked much about that so far, but how much of an impact do you think it had on like your mum and your dad to be able to sort of connect? And we've always said that the athletes connect with people like them, which really helps mentally. Do you think it would be the exact same for your parents and your brothers and stuff like that?
Without shadow of doubt. I think that it was like a release valve possibly for my parents to meet other parents that had been through the same thing. They no longer had to explain what their children had been going through or what they were doing. We were just children. We weren't any different any longer. Everyone was in the same boat and everyone felt exactly the same. When you're in a in a normal society in small towns, you almost feel obliged to explain what you've been through all the time. And people mostly mean well, asking how things are. But a lot of people are quite sort of pushing and nosy and want to really know more than you may be comfortable with. And you just want to be a child at the end of the day. And that's what Transplant Sport allowed me to be.
Yeah, so moving through the years, obviously you moved through junior sections and that kind of stuff. What sports did you particularly take a liking to in the transplant sport arena?
Well, it was interesting really because I become a bit of an all-rounder. I enjoyed every sport. My family is quite sporty. So I probably focused when I was younger. I did swimming and I did running and long jump, and those are the ones I tended to excel at, and that was up till about 16 or 17. And then at that age I sort of started focusing on just swimming, because you start facing adults that have had no issues through childhood, so they've developed normally, and they're much better athletes, simply put. They're just physically better. So I found that I excelled then in swimming, so I've focused on that since.
And yeah, so talk to me about some of your greatest successes in the transplant games, and in particular sort of a couple of moments which have really defined it for you.
I think the biggest moment for me was when I first got selected for Team GB, and it was part of the first children's team to ever be taken to the World Transplant Games. It was a very small team. I think there was only maybe 10, maybe 15 of us, very, very small team. And we went to, I think France was the first one, or was it Canada? I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But just being selected as part of that team felt very, very, very good, because before it primarily been focused on adult sport and what adults could achieve, and children were sort of a secondary thought. But since those first few days, children are taken far more seriously. There are outstanding athletes coming through, and I suppose the second one would be when I won gold in breaststroke in South Africa in 2012 was probably my last performance where I did well before my health started to slowly decline.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. So you've obviously recently had, obviously a transplant failed this time, like now after 26 years, I finally started to rehabilitate. So was it something that was expected, and were you prepared for it?
Oddly, from the day the transplant went in, it started failing and it started reducing in function. The best level of function I ever had was about 30%, and it was decreasing from that first day. I got to about 16, and they said that it would fail probably within the next week or so, and that didn't happen. So it was I was constantly on a knife edge of whether it would fail or not. What was the final nail in the coffin was that I had like a twisted bowel, which was from my first transplant, which from the first transplant, it caused scar tissue. The scar tissue formed adhesions in the stomach, and the adhesions caused the bowels to twist. They had to go in and operate, remove some bowel, and they said that, if the transplant survives this, you'll be very lucky. It lasted maybe 2 more years, and it did fail. And it was a gradual progression. It went from me feeling well to being a bit unable to walk 5 meters or up a flight of stairs, or a single step of stairs. So it was becoming evident that I needed to start dialysis pretty quickly. Although I tried to hold off as long as possible, because it does control your life somewhat. Yeah.
So obviously you're on dialysis now. How much does that sort of affect the way that you live at the moment?
It dictates how much I can work. It dictates what I can eat and drink. It dictates where I can potentially live. It dictates where I can go. It does have quite a stranglehold on your life, really. And if you do focus on what it does dictate too much, I think it could be quite a depressing experience. So what I tend to focus on is what I can do, and I can exercise probably even to a better standard than I did before.
Yeah. So are you looking now? Are you on the waiting list for any transplant to happen, or is it?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was this would be my fourth transplant. They were going to look at whether it could be done at the Birmingham Queen Elizabeth, because that's where my medical team is, even though I live in mid Wales. And once they did the scans to assess where the blood vessels were, they found there was no vena cava, which meant they couldn't plumb the kidney in an easy fashion anyway. So they said that they couldn't do it, and that I was to go to Manchester and see if they could do it, because they are a specialist in complex surgeries. I went to Manchester and they agreed that they could do it, but they expressed how difficult it might be. In terms of a waiting list, I have a 98% antibody level, which means I've got an average wait of probably 10 years if I was to wait for a deceased organ. So my only real chance would be from a living relative or through a paired exchange scheme. And the paired exchange scheme is if a friend or a relative wants to donate to me. They're not a match, but they might be a match to say, if you need an organ, so we could swap. That's in its simple context anyway.
Yeah. So moving on from that, obviously, like how much you said you're able to exercise a lot now.
Yeah.
So detailing sort of what you're doing during lockdown, are you able to stay fit and active?
Yeah, well, luckily, back in the winter, I bought a turbo trainer so I could cycle indoors. And obviously, that's just extended through this shielding period. I've also got a treadmill, and because I'm a bit frugal, I also have my own gym at home. So I've got my own free weights at home. So my training, the only thing I haven't been able to do is swim. Otherwise, everything has been the same, if not more, because I've treated it a bit like a training camp. I can wake up, I can eat properly, I can rest in the middle of the day, and then I can train again in the afternoon if I want. So for me, I haven't really found it too difficult. I've actually found it relatively enjoyable. So I've not had to worry about anything but taking care of myself, without the stresses of work and everything else to think about.
Yeah. And finally, this is how we all finish. It's going to be made into a one big graphic at the end of this. So can you give me 3 words to define what transplant sport has done both to you physically and mentally?
Oh wow, I think it's a humbling experience. It's a freeing experience, and it's simply enjoyable. It's very, very hard to put into 3 words because it's such a complex thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Murray, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to hear your story. And if anyone else is here watching this and fancies coming on and detailing their transplant sport story, please feel free to get in touch with me or Lucy Young as well, or Zoe, or anyone really, because they'll all pass it on. But thank you very much for joining me, Murray, and we will see you next time.
Thanks very much, Chris.